Welcome back for another episode of Education in Focus. Today, Lisa, Jason, and myself are spending some time thinking about school avoidance, why it happens, and what parents and schools can do to support children. So, Lisa, Jason, what is school refusal?
It's really when anxiety builds up to the point that a young person can't go into school. Um, we often call it school avoidance or school refusal, but I think we should probably start by saying that I know many people don't like those terms because they're actually really unintentionally placing blame on the child. They're making it seem like a choice, like they're choosing not to go.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's often not the case. It's they can't do, not that they won't do. So sometimes you might also hear it referred to as anxiety related absence or also emotionally based school avoidance, which is shortened to ESBA. So we'll probably use a lot of terms today, but they are all kind of encompassing the same thing. And I think it's fair to say that many children can find it really difficult to articulate why they're feeling so anxious about going into school and why they're feeling that heightened sense of stress. So it's all about kind of what it is they're finding hard rather than the underlying causes. You know, we might see it in a number of different ways. They might not want to get up and get ready. They might just say that they can't go. They might be worrying a lot about very small issues, such as having the right equipment for a lesson. They can show us that they're struggling with this in a number of ways, but it is anxiety related to going to
Mm, yeah. And for many children, you probably recognise that just getting up in the morning and getting ready every day is a struggle. I mean, it is probably for most parents anyway, most households, but
school. I feel it as an
children
adult.
yeah. But I think for a lot of the children we're thinking about, it's multiplied, isn't it? It's that times 10. So it could be that every single day is a miracle to get across that threshold into the school, say your goodbye, and walk off and leave them for the day in school. And so it probably doesn't take much more to tip them over the edge where they feel they can no longer make that step. I suppose that's where the line has crossed over for some reason, and it is typically probably more relevant to older pupils. I just imagine that we don't tend to see it much in primary, do we?
Not quite so much. And I think also when we think about it tipping over the edge for children, if we think about anxiety in general, it's not just worrying about something, it's so much more pervasive than that. So these children might be struggling to sleep before going to school, in which case you've got the added impact of being really quite chronically tired because their sleep has been impacted. But also anxiety can come out in terms of feelings of physical sickness. So they might be
Mm,
reporting headaches, stomach aches, nausea, all of that, which makes it seem like it really is a physical impossibility for them to get in. So yes, we do see the anxiety side, the worrying, that kind of thing, but also there can be real physical repercussions of it as well that just make the problem so much harder to address.
yeah, and I suppose that's where possibly a bit of advice is useful, isn't it? I guess parents are very good at doing this already, but recognizing that the physical symptoms might be something to do with the feelings is probably helpful at very early stages to help children begin to understand that. So having those conversations like saying, "Gosh, I bet your tummy is hurting, but sometimes the tummy's hurt because we feel a bit wobbly inside and our feelings are very big, and that can make our tummy." So that might be what's happening today. I wonder if that's what it is, and just keeping that kind of narrative, because later on, if those feelings persist and they're older and they're struggling to manage them, at least if they've got some narrative underneath it, it might be little bit easier, maybe perhaps less likely to result in some absence from school, because they might recognize what's going on for themselves a little bit more.
Can we pinpoint any of the reasons for emotional based school avoidance? We talked about anxiety, but of what maybe, or are there other reasons?
God, loads. I made a big list in the end because it's just when I start thinking about it, like separation is often a problem. I should say always, but often a problem, isn't it, with children who've had attachment difficulties and trauma? So that constant separation from an adult, that underlying fear of, are they coming back? Are
Mm.
they going to come back? Are they going to be there for me at home time? Because is that sometimes that object permanence thing, isn't it? Once they're out of sight, do they exist? Do I exist in their mind anymore? And that kind of thing. So that can just be sitting there every single day, constantly. So I think we maybe talked about this in other podcasts, and I'm just cast my mind back. I can't remember, but having those transition objects can be very helpful, can't it, in those situations? And And I'm sure lots of parents know about those sorts of things already, but probably it's helpful to help the school know that this is okay, that the child does need to have this object attached to their bag or something that they have that they hold in the pocket that they can squeeze or sniff or look at. It just reminds them of the person, their parents. So that kind of thing can just be a way of managing it throughout the day, so they recognise that the person will be there. You're not forgotten. It'll be all right. But yeah, separation anxiety is quite often a feature, isn't it? And just the fact that a lot of them find school unpredictable, possibly because, and as they know, safety is probably the predominating fear, isn't it, for a lot of them?
Yeah, there are so many times within the school day where things are unpredictable, both in terms of your sensory experiences as well as just that uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen. Children have to relinquish an awful lot of control when they go into school because the day is dictated by the adults around them. And I think that just that lack of control can be very debilitating for some children. We also know that if we think specifically about children who have experienced care, then it's possible that they're going to be experiencing delay of some kind. That might be kind of like emotional delay,
Mm.
might be kind of in terms of the academic work that they're able to do. But that can mean that children are often sitting, finding all of the work really quite challenging. And that is really debilitating too. Schools also place high expectations on children. You know, we want them to shoot for the stars. So even when children are coping with the work, still the pressure to live up to expectation can be difficult. But if I kind of circle back around to kind of that emotional development, that can often leave many of our children out of line with their peers. And that can mean that they struggle forming relationships,
Mm.
keeping those relationships. And so peer difficulties can be a reason why children face a lot of anxiety going to school. I mean, the list it is endless because it doesn't actually also have to be school based. It might be something that's happening outside of school. Perhaps if they've experienced a bereavement recently or divorce or someone in their family that they care about is very ill, that can all just trigger so many feelings that make the challenge of school seem
Mm.
insurmountable. So you've also got things happening outside as well that
Mm-hmm.
could translate into school. Exams as well. I do feel as a ex-secondary teacher, I need to mention that those can place an awful lot of anxiety
Yeah.
in our
Mm.
children, you know, and they are seemingly ever present because it might not just be your big exam seasons of SATs, GCSEs, and A levels. It could be just the regular
Mm.
testing that happens inside many lessons.
Yeah. Gosh, I was just thinking as you were talking about that, how um, if you think, if you sort of put yourself in their shoes for a moment, if a child or young person is finding academic life a struggle. So most lessons they will feel like they're not quite in line with their peers for whatever reason. That's just going to feel hard, and you're going to feel different. Even from quite young ages, children start to notice that they feel different.
Yeah.
If you then think, okay, in the social parts of the day where it's social time, play times, if that's a struggle as well, there's no part of the day which isn't hard work and exhausting and really difficult. I mean, if you were going to, as an adult, I was thinking if you were going to work and you were faced with tasks all day long which were just a bit too hard for you and you couldn't do them without someone having to help you, you'd feel a bit rubbish about yourself. And then if you
Yeah.
went on to go and mix and socialize with some of the people you're with and you just can't get on with them, you just don't understand them, they don't understand you, and you feel a bit disconnected from them, you're going to think, why the heck am I going in every day to face that? What we wouldn't choose to do that as adults, probably would opt out because we can. We'd probably try and get a different job or whatever. But children, young people just can't. They're being sent into these environments potentially with that kind of experience taking place. So I suppose it's thinking about what are we able to do as a team. I say we in terms of parents and schools to try and reduce some of those challenges. Really,
Well, a whole host of reasons, with
yeah,
probably many more.
Probably many, many more,
yeah,
but hopefully we've just given a bit of a flavour of some of the things that might be underlying that anxiety.
So thinking about a whole host of reasons, that doesn't detract away from the fact that where possible we need to try and get our children or our young people to go to school. What can parents do? I imagine as a parent it's a real anxiety provoking time for lots of reasons. So what can parents try and do to support their child or children with all those difficulties?
I'm glad you said it's anxiety inducing for parents as well, because I think it
Hmm.
really is. And I know that we're going to come to that in a bit, but thinking, like, first of all, what they can do for their child, I do think, which many people do, is really trying to identify, or trying to get the child to identify what the root cause of the anxiety is so beneficial, because there's so many steps that a school can take to support, and that we as parents can do to support. But if we're thinking that perhaps the academic work is the problem, and we're putting in steps for that, if it's actually a peer issue, that isn't going to solve the problem. It's not
Mm.
going to help reduce the anxiety. So there's a really nice activity called the anxiety iceberg, and you can
Mm.
kind of sit with your little one, draw a picture of an iceberg, which thankfully isn't that complicated because my artistic skills are limited. And then on the tip above the water, you can write down the behaviors that you're seeing. So it might be them saying things like, I don't want to go.
Mm.
Um, Perhaps not sleeping, perhaps feeling sick, those kinds of things. But then
Yeah.
underneath the waterline, which is obviously the bigger portion of the iceberg, you can start to do some wondering about what it is. And I think it's important that parents can lead that wondering, because children quite often don't know, or haven't got the words to articulate it. So you might wonder if the playground is too busy,
Mhm.
or I wonder if you're finding some of the work confusing, or I wonder if you're struggling with some of your teachers,
Yeah.
or I wonder if you feel a bit lonely, or I wonder if you miss mommy. And just try and put some ideas out there and see whether it hits. And if
Mm.
you get one that hits, then you can perhaps explore it a little bit more. And I appreciate that older children, I don't know if they're 15, 16, they might not really want to do an anxiety iceberg with you, but you can
Not
do
so
the same
much.
thing in a mind map, and just kind of put
Yeah.
the school in the center, and just lots of little kind of bubbles off it, and just see what they bring, and see if we can kind of like wander together to get to the root cause. Because without that, does kind of mean that you're shooting into the dark to try and find things that will help. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I suppose if you imagine a child that struggles to sit and do those things, some little children might not want to engage with those conversations at a
Mm,
table. I'm thinking of some children I've fostered who just you would not be able to do that. They wouldn't want
yeah.
to acknowledge it somehow. So you have to try and be a bit more, use a bit of imagination, don't you, and try and think, well, what can I do? So I was imagining, sometimes at bath time you can perhaps ask one of those questions, and then next day ask another question at another opportune moment, just just in between something else that's going on. Flick that the question out, just check what it is, and then as you go by, you kind of go through those questions, but perhaps over a period of days. So you do your wondering, a bit of detective work, but perhaps less intensively if they feel that your child can't cope with those kind of. Let's sit down and have a conversation, because just a few of them won't be able to do that. So that's a really good way of trying to unpick and identify. So then the idea is that hopefully they'll trust you enough to say, this will help us to work with the school so they can know what's going on inside you, because we want them to help. I think that the biggest thing is help finding a way for them to be heard, and I think that's one they often they say they don't when they feel heard. As thinking about surveys and feedback I've heard from young people and children, they've said they need to be heard. They want people to listen to what's going on so they feel understood. And so that's a massive way that we can do that, isn't it? By just getting those conversations going in some form, like you said, those structured conversations is great. Using those icebergs or mind maps, whatever it might be, great.
I think alongside that as well, there are some other things that parents might find helpful, and we do recognise that not everything works for every child and every
Mm-hmm.
family, but just some other things that might work. Um, is to kind of recognize the small achievements. If they do find it hard to get out of bed, or they do find it hard to kind of put the uniform on, or they do find certain steps hard, every step hard,
Yeah.
then we can recognize what they have managed to do, and
Mm.
offer acknowledgements of that. Really, they find it hard and they did it. So rather than focusing on what they've still not done and they've
Mm.
still got yet to do, then trying to just recognize those small achievements. But also another thing to think about is to not make everything in life about going to school. And I know it's a massive issue that will be pervasive for children and adults, but try to encourage relaxing times. Try to encourage seeing friends and family. Try to encourage listening to music, playing sport, baking, drawing, watching films, whatever it is that they enjoy and find relaxing. That doesn't need to be taken away from their lives because of this one big
Mm.
problem. Because if they are feeling more relaxed, they are going to have more resilience. So trying to promote those activities
Yeah, and
where possible.
that might mean saying no to homework then, and
Yeah.
we've had that discussion
Yeah.
in the previous podcast about homework, haven't we? Um, let's not don't let school intrude any further into the day if it's already difficult enough. Homework is not important enough. If you compare it to a child that's struggling to go in, you don't want to tip them into the edge where they're not going in. So homework can wait if necessary. You might feel guilty as a parent that you feel like I'm not doing any reading, I've not done my spellings, etc. Well, that's okay. But what's more important, we've got to start with the emotional well-being first, because the reading and spelling won't happen. Won't happen.
Mm.
Another thing that's helpful for some children, not all, it will not work for everyone, but we spoke about predictability and routine for some children being what they need. And actually, if we can create a morning routine for
Mhm.
them, that can also in itself be, quite helpful. I'm I'm thinking of my own household here, which is very chaotic in the morning. And thankfully, we can get away with that. But I'm just thinking for a child who's perhaps struggling, if you can increase the security for them, that predictability for them before school, that might help. So again, not for everyone, but it might be thinking
Mm,
whether there's a morning routine that would help.
yeah. I'm sure people are very aware of things like visual timetables and stuff, and they don't work for everyone, but they can work for some, and they have worked for some children. I can remember where we just had little images like a little t-shirt and shorts. That's PE day on the little visual timetables. Is that then maybe a picture of a bike because we're going to go on our bikes to school on that day. I mean, the weather might change, but anyway, that's the plan. And the things that are just generally going to take place across the week, each day they can say, "Oh, we're on this day now," because a lot of children just don't remember what day it is. They can't keep track. So it's the Tuesday. Look, it's this day here. What's on? Oh, right, it's not a PE day. It's our normal school club. Let's do those things, and just take it, just breaking it all down into small steps, because everything can be huge and overwhelming. So that's where it becomes unmanageable for some people. We all know that feeling as well, when everything just feels too much. You don't know where to start. How do you take that first step? So that's one thing you can do. Let's just take one step. What's the first thing we need to do? Okay, let's just do that thing and focus our energy on that thing, not the million things that we're worrying about might or might not happen the rest of the day. So, right, we've got our t-shirt on. Fab. Like you said, acknowledging each step, praising them for getting ready, because getting ready and coming down for breakfast might be a massive achievement, and it's worth saying it through gritted teeth if you're frustrated and annoyed because it's been a nightmare and you're thinking we're going to be late. We can talk about options about routinely being late as well, if that's part of the problem with the anxiety, because there are solutions around that too.
Just one thing before we start thinking about what we can kind of like do with school, I wouldn't want to leave this section without, and this is easier said than done, but try to take the pressure off.
Mhm.
And that's the pressure off you as a parent, but also off your child as well. On the one hand, it's very scary thinking that this is a battle that for some families they fight daily. That's very scary and exhausting and overwhelming. But then there's also another way of looking at it, which is like if it didn't work today, you can always try again tomorrow. And like I say, I know it's easier said than done, but try if you can to just take that pressure off. This is a
Mhm.
very real problem which has a massive impact upon the mental health of children and their parents. And you are allowed to be struggling with it. They're not a failure as a child, and you're not a failure as a parent. We can try again tomorrow. So just try to remember that and be kind when it
Hmm.
hasn't gone to plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things we need to do, of course, is work really carefully with the schools and start as soon as you can by letting them know as soon as there are any problems that are starting to bubble, because often they don't bubble beyond a few niggles, and sometimes they can, which is where we don't want it to go to. So the sooner the schools can be there involved, the better. Everyone can work together with a sort of coherent message, and recognizing the child's difficulty. Saying we all recognize it's tricky, so let's see what we can do to help. Um, we've talked loads of times. I keep going back to this. I can't remember how many times I've said about, have you got a meet and greet? It's, in cases where I get asked to support parents and schools, so often that's a solution that's not been tried yet, and it's such an easy thing to do. And it's in terms of, it doesn't take hours of time for a school to provide somebody. You're not asking for full-time support all day long, but the difference, by having a person smiling, ready to greet that child in the morning is a massive help. So if that handover, that getting to school is tricky, it's important to see if we can get somebody in school who can be there to help meet you, not necessarily meet you at the door, but wherever it will be convenient, and have that brief chat, and that you want that person to welcome your child with open arms, saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Tom / Daisy, whatever your name is." Your day, my day's going to get so much more bright that now that you're here. The message being, I need you. You're needed. You're wanted. Because that's the thing that often is missing, isn't it, for them? And having that one person can just take them, greet them, and then before you know, you just sort of quietly slip away, and they won't have noticed. Yeah, or you could just say your goodbyes, but they'll be hopefully then looking forward to doing the next thing. And there's that sense of trust. And that's where you can have the transitional object to hand over, or whatever it is you need to do, or talk about how you've been that morning, or try not to talk about it if necessary, and just forget about it because we're just here and then we're all going to have a lovely time. But having that sort of meet and greet is so important. There are lots of things you can do that can help as well. If that meet and greet can't happen at the normal door where everyone else is going in, you can do it on the playground. You can do it at the main entrance. They can do it before the majority of children come in. You can do it after the majority of children have gone in. If the noise and the busyness is too much, then don't do it. Then you can do it in other ways. I think of many times where I've had children who maybe came a few minutes earlier than the others, or went straight into the building because hanging around on the playground or milling around or waiting to get in, whatever, it was just awkward and stressful. Then let's get rid of the stress. Let's just come in a different way. Sometimes those children quite like coming a bit early because they can come and help sharpen some pencils or put some paper out, whatever, do something meaningful, feel welcomed, see the teacher, feel a bit of relief. Oh, phew, teacher's here. Okay, I'm all right. I feel a bit better. So that anxiety can drop down a step. And then the children start arriving. And, so that can help come in the main entrance. As I said, if things are difficult, though, in terms of getting to school on time, and you're beginning to get very stressed about being there, and maybe you've had some lates, then that's the time to talk to schools about arrangements that you can have for coming in and how that can happen. So if you need to take it a further step than just having a different entrance or a few minutes either side of the normal drop-off time, then schools can modify the register time for your child, so you're not registered as late at the same time as everyone else is. Not permanently. This is not a permanent arrangement, but occasionally you can agree, okay, for the next few weeks, months, whatever, or a couple of months, for a trial period, we're not going to say late at, I don't know, 9 o'clock. We're going to give it another 10 minutes, if that's possible, whatever seems reasonable, and see if the child can then get to school within that window, so that, okay, they're still technically a bit late, but they're not being constantly punished, and neither are you being punished, because let's face it, that isn't going to change anything. If you're doing everything you can in your power to get them there, and a fine or a threat of a punishment what's that going to do? It's not going to make any difference at all. You're not going to be able to try any harder than you are. So this is one way of working a bit more constructively, but you have to have it through a discussion, an agreed plan, and it has to be signed, because the school obviously doesn't want to get itself in trouble for saying it's just letting children come whenever they want, because of course it's not. It's making reasonable adjustments. Comes under that umbrella of reasonable adjustments, probably, for pupils with additional needs. And I've done that sort of thing personally when I was ahead. I did a couple of occasions where we had a child that needed to do that. One was actually a child who was adopted, who happened to have some physical illness at the time, which meant it wasn't so much anxiety in that case. It just meant that they struggled sometimes to physically get ready and get themselves into school. So rather than causing a load of hassles with lots of late marks, which were inappropriate, we had an arrangement where they could come in a few minutes later. They didn't really miss anything. They didn't miss the start of the lessons particularly. They might have just missed some of that hubble bubble at the start of the day, but it just took a lot of stress off everybody, and it still worked. So you can do that, and you can do it for a short period of time, like I say, and review it and see if it's still appropriate. And in the meantime, see what other measures you can put in place to try and reduce the anxiety, so that hopefully you can sort of creep back to standard times if that's going to work. So there are options, you see, available. I think people might need to consider them if it comes to the crunch.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait for things to go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And I think those other options, that you talk about those temporary measures whilst other things are thought about, are really important. And some of the things you can ask the school for or think about will depend upon what comes up from that wondering that
Yeah,
you've done. So,
yeah.
for example, if they're feeling isolated or perhaps having difficulties with their peers, you might want to have conversations with school about what activities and clubs they can do at break and lunchtime,
Mm,
because that can provide some structure for them. Reduce feelings of anxiety about what they're going to do and who they're going to spend the time with, and are they going to be on their own? Is someone going to pick on them? So that could help. But also sometimes some schools are able to offer kind of responsibilities during those
mm,
times. So it might be a library monitor, or someone to help in the dining room, or whatever it is. But they might be able to be given little jobs during those
yeah,
times. Many schools have peer buddies or mentors, so it
they
might
do.
be
Yeah.
that they can kind of get part of that scheme, and that can help reduce their feelings of isolation. Um, so those are, just some things you could ask for if peer difficulties were present. Perhaps if it's something more on the lines of finding school very kind of like overwhelming and confusing and chaotic, then I mean Jason's already mentioned a visual timetable for home, but visual timetables at school could be used. It might be something like having an exit card for lessons,
Mm,
so they can leave when they start to feel overwhelmed. Um, Schools can also hopefully manage to have a member of staff help them with the transition between lessons. I'm thinking secondary school here. So that chaotic time where kids have to leave one lesson and arrive at another lesson on time so that they're not penalised for being late, but they have to navigate busy hallways and possibly a big site to do it. That can be very overwhelming for some children. And it is possible for schools to organise someone to help with that transition. So I would quite routinely have children who are allowed to leave lessons 5 minutes early and would be collected and taken to their next place, because it just reduced their anxiety of being
mm.
late for the next lesson, getting lost, being pushed, or I was about to say trampled, hopefully not trampled, but you know what I mean. They can
Yeah.
be chaotic, those corridors. So that might be something. If it's the schoolwork that's difficult, then you might want to be having conversations about how well the work is differentiated for your child. Because if they are finding everything hard all of the time, it means that possibly the work is not being set at the right level. Maybe they're in the wrong set. Maybe you might want to ask for a set change or a class change, if these things are possible, just to
Mm,
reduce their feelings of anxiety. And hopefully, if we can kind of find the right combination for them, then it's something that can um, take effect during that period that Jason was talking about, where you're not having to get to school at a certain, so you have a little bit more leeway.
mhm,
So, but those are just some of the things that you can possibly ask school for, but it will depend very much on what the underlying cause of the anxiety is.
mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other services that can offer support, or anywhere else that parents can go?
Definitely. I found, when looking at kind of like information for today, I found the Young Minds website really good. They've got a lot of fantastic information, some of which I've cherry picked for today, but there's plenty more that I won't have time to cover. But what I also found really helpful is the fact that they've got a parents helpline. And so you can call and just talk to someone, perhaps acknowledging how difficult it is as a parent to have to manage this, because obviously we're thinking here about the child's anxiety and the child's well-being, but it's
Mm,
important to kind of have a nod to yours as well. um Sometimes perhaps the child is struggling to go in, um because perhaps the school is not adequately catering to their special educational need or disability. Perhaps they haven't quite got the reasonable adjustments right yet. And if you feel that that's a battle that you're not winning, you're not feeling heard, then you might want to seek support from either IPSI or SENDIAS. Just get advice and support from them if that's something that's at play here. And then another one that I thought was really useful is there's something called Not Fine in School, and that is a parent and carer led organisation offering information and practical resources for families where the children are struggling with school. So those are some other places that can offer support.
Well, that's a really good list, isn't it? I mean, there's also the National Association of Therapeutic Parents as well, the NAOTP. They have their listening circles and things like that. So there's no doubt a section for things like this sort of topic we're talking about today. I'm sure opportunities for support there for people who get it. That's the thing, isn't it? Getting it, because you need that support as much as your child, young person does, as you were saying. Don't forget, we do as well, the Adoptiverse, don't we? In our own, through Adoption Focus, we've got our Adoptiverse sessions where parents come in. In fact, the few days ago, prior to the recording of this, we actually had some parents at the session, and it was an evening one, wasn't it? Where there were this child who was at home because they were really struggling with school, and it's evident from that discussion that there were things that were not in place that could be. So again, we were able to offer some suggestions and some advice. The problem with this issue is that it isn't an easy fix. We've got to acknowledge it's not a case of just do X and Y and it'll all be fine. It can be if it's a temporary blip, but if there's a long-term mental health issue, then it can be a longer-term solution required as well, and support has to be given through it for a longer time. But it can be done. There are options out there, aren't there?
I really hope that helped anyone listening to think a bit deeper about school avoidance and maybe generated some ideas of how parents and schools can help young people. If you have any questions or think you could do some support or even fancy joining us on the podcast, then please don't hesitate to contact us at education@adoption-focus.org.uk.